So it's Friday, and as promised, here we go with part 2 in this iconic horror movie franchise. Friday the 13th Part 2 is brought to us by director Steve Miner and stars Amy Steele and John Foray. So as the name so bluntly implies, this is the second entry in the Friday the 13th saga. Originally conceived much like the film Halloween that it was made as a result of, as a yearly anthology horror series, they did change course a bit because the setting of Crystal Lake and all the mythos around the Voorhees clan was so popular they decided to go with a direct sequel. Problem is, Pamela Voorhees, who was the murderer in the first film, was definitively killed in the end of that one by beheading. Kinda hard to come back from that unless you're Michael Myers. So instead, they decided to elaborate on the history of her son's death. Now before I go any further, much like I said with the review of Friday the 13th, I will be including spoilers here. And I know it seems a bit weird to be giving a spoiler warning for a 40-year-old movie, but it is what it is. Some people haven't seen this series, and I don't want to ruin it for you. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, then come back and watch this video. Double views. Now coming out just 1 week shy of 1 year since the original movie came out, Friday the 13th Part 2 burst onto the scene. And, well, it didn't do quite as good as the first one. It was still successful enough to spawn another 10 movies after this one, but it still wasn't as successful as the first one. And if you ask me, a lot of that is due to the fact that this is just kind of the same movie again. Granted, Pamela Voorhees is not the murderer this time around, though Betsy Palmer, as do many of the other people from the first film, do make a return in parts. The basic story arc and the beats of the film are pretty much the same. It's 5 years later, we have a camp. It's not Camp Crystal Lake, but it is at Crystal Lake. But this time, the camp is for training camp counselors, so it's kind of like a Jason Voorhees fucking smorgasbord. Another thing that doesn't quite work here is the reveal of who our killer is. There's really no question as to who it is throughout the film. The movie projects it way out pretty much from the beginning. They talk about Jason Voorhees a lot in this movie. They talk about how his body was never really found, and there's this legend that he's out in the woods hunting people down, and he saw his mother murdered, and he's just pissed off about that, and he's just out there living off the land. They keep bringing it up, and they bring it up so much that when it is revealed that Jason is still alive, and he's the one out there doing this murdering, you're not really surprised. You're like, well yeah, fucking duh, you've been saying it the whole goddamn movie. In the first movie, we'd never even heard of Pamela Voorhees. We'd never even heard the name Voorhees. We just heard that a boy drowned in the lake, amongst a lot of other people that got murdered at Camp Crystal Lake. If you'd never seen the movie or didn't know the mythology, you would not make the connection. The movie didn't project it. It was a big surprise when Pamela Voorhees showed up because you knew nothing about her. You just thought she was another victim who just showed up. But no, then she turns out to be the murderer and she gives you the information then. That's what made it kind of a, oh my god, holy shit moment. Not this one. They project that shit out way out from the beginning, and I think that that was a big mistake. Now, I don't expect Jason to show up in his form in this film and really give that exposition, but maybe they could have at least waited till a little bit closer to the end of the film to let us know who it was. Or let us know that, hey, Jason's body was never found, or something like that. I don't know, they could have done something and pushed it out a bit further so we didn't know the whole time that it's just Jason. Why are you guys even covering it up? We know who it is. So much like the first movie, you've got a whole bunch of camp counselors that are out in the woods fornicating, getting high, doing all that kind of shit, and a mystery murderer going and picking them off one by one. The big difference here is you don't have that big reveal oh shit moment in the end of the film. So take that out of part 1 and part 2 is what you end up with. Is it a bad movie? No, it is a nice companion piece to the first film. But really, I look at this film kind of like you look at Jaws 2 compared to the first Jaws. It's not a bad movie per se, but it pales in comparison to the first one. It does everything the first one does, and it does more of it, but it does not necessarily do it better. Jaws 2 is an entertaining enough film, as is Friday the 13th Part 2. It's just not as good as its predecessor. When I say this thing is kind of like the same movie on repeat, I mean it. If you put these movies side by side, beside that big oh shit moment in the end, which this one kinda has that moment, they at least try and frame it that way. It's just not an oh shit moment because you kinda already know it. But besides that, these movies are extremely similar. They follow the exact same story beats for the most part, even all the way up to the big jump scare ending that that was all a dream. Now, all that being said, there is something that the movie does a bit better than the first one, and that is some of the kills. The kills do get a bit more creative and bloody this time around. Still nowhere near the heights of creativity and over-the-top craziness that the series will eventually get to. But you can tell they had a bit more money this time around to show a bit more of the red, icky, gooey stuff. It's not all just stabby, stabby, cutty, cutty like it was last time. This time, there's a bit more flair to some of the kills. Now, that also being said, I will say that many of the kills in this film, though they are a bit more glorious, they are kind of, in parts, just heightened versions of kills from the first film. So yeah, it kind of goes along with that whole made the same movie twice thing. Now, performance-wise, things get a little bit more into that Friday the 13th groove that we've been expecting. Not quite as hokey and goofy as they will end up for sure, but I wouldn't say that the performances here are as good as they were in the first movie. Now, they're not bad, but the vast majority of the characters in this film, save one or two, are just pretty much character types. You know what to expect out of these characters. They're just one thing. And yeah, we had some of that in the first film, but there was a bit more variety in that one. Here, they're all just cannon fodder. You look at them, they don't really have much individual personality. They all just kind of want to get high and fuck, which granted, that's kind of all I wanted to do when I was a teenager. I mean, hell, that's kind of all I want to do now. I just don't get high anymore. But whatever. This is a fucking movie, and I would like a bit more character motivation diversity in my characters. Now, even though the great Tom Savini is not here doing the special effects this time around, we do get some pretty good effects, especially for 1981. Now, they're obviously all practical, and they all look good. Now, when we finally see Jason's face at the end of the film, it's okay. It's clearly a prosthetic, but I mean, it's fine, I guess. There's been a lot of debate around how this character looks because in the next film, he doesn't look like that. Some people say it's just because it was a dream. That's what she thought he looked like. But there's a part earlier on where she removes the mask and sees him. We, the audience, don't see him, but she does, and she goes, "Oh my God," or something like that. So she clearly knew what the guy looked like. So dream or not, that whole argument doesn't really stand up for me. I think that, yeah, that's what he looked like, or at least that's what the fuck she saw. Either way, I'm getting off track here. All that shit aside, the character itself, the prosthetics and everything, he looked pretty good. It was a little shaky, wasn't quite as good as all the gore effects, but it was fine, especially for a low-budget 1981 slasher flick. Now, speaking of that ending, this was one part of the movie that has always kind of bothered me. In the end of the film, we find that in Jason's little hut, he's got his mom's head there with her sweater and like this whole shrine thing going on to her. And our character Jenny gets locked in this room as he's trying to beat the door down with this severed head and all that stuff. And she decides on a whim, real quick, to throw on Pamela Voorhees' sweater and convince Jason that she is his mom and tell him to stop. Now, I get that given what Jason probably has going on in his head, his mental state as a whole, this might work, but I don't feel like this would be anybody's first go-to. I don't think that someone would be in this room the amount of time that she was and decide, hey, I know what to do. I'm gonna grab that fucking sweater, that dead chick right there next to that severed head, put it the fuck on and act like I'm his mom. I'm going to say things to him like his mom does, even though I've never fucking heard this woman talk. I don't know how she talked to her son. We know that as the audience because that's how she talked to him in the first movie, but she doesn't. She was never fucking there. She just puts the sweater on and starts talking to him like the mother did in the first movie. Now, that always kind of bothered me. All the not knowing the mannerisms of the mother stuff aside, the fact that that's where she went. Going into this room, discovering this altar, she's in there for like 20 seconds before he knocks the fucking door down. That's her go-to. That's what she decides to do. I feel like most people are not gonna go straight to that, but she did. That's the route she went. There's a fucking machete in the room, but instead of picking that up and like waiting at the door for him to burst through and then like clocking him in the fucking head with it, no. Instead, I'm gonna put this fucking dead chick's fucking sweater on and just act like I'm his mom and hope for the best. It's shit like that in movies that I think about, and it's what's bothered me about this movie for 40 fucking years. As it stands though, as kind of ho-hum as the ending is, the movie overall is fine. Like I said, it's a nice compliment to the first film. If you like the first Friday the 13th, you'll find something here to enjoy as well. Guys, Friday the 13th Part 2 is fine. It's not as great as the first one, but it's not as bad as some of the later entries in the series get. It's in this weird little place where it doesn't have anything that really makes it stand out in the crowd. It doesn't have the iconic hockey mask that Jason has later on in the film series. Now, this time around, he's just fucking potato sack Jason, and that just doesn't have the same visual impact. The ending reveal isn't really much of a reveal, and the movie as a whole is kind of a carbon copy of the first film. But as I said, what it does fairly well, except for some of those ending parts. It's okay, but it's not the greatest. But as a whole, it does it pretty good. If you like the first one, you're gonna like this one. And overall, I'd say that Friday the 13th Part 2 is absolutely worth streaming.
Across the street.
While on its own 2 feet, the movie isn't really all that. As a companion piece to the first film, this movie is absolutely worth checking out. If you watch the first Friday the 13th, you're gonna wanna watch this one right after it. So if you do plan on watching Friday the 13th, then absolutely check out Friday the 13th Part 2, and I don't think you'll be that disappointed. So there it is, guys, my review of Friday the 13th Part 2. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you want to help out the channel, check out my Patreon in the description below and become a jarhead and get some of the awesome benefits that go along with that, like these guys. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Camp Blood.
The day you count on for terror is not over.
Fun fact, well, not really fun, actually kind of creepy, but this version that I watched is the unrated version of the film. It's got like 43 extra seconds added to it that the MPAA made them remove so as to not get an X rating back in 1981. Now, me myself, I don't know what 43 seconds was added. I think some of it was that stabbing of the 2 people that were having sex scene, and it really, there was nothing really that bad there by today's standards. But the thing that's kind of creepy about all this is that there was a scene of a character full frontal that was removed from the final film. This actress was Morta Cobra, and she played the character of Sandra, and unbeknownst, I assume, by the people who made the movie, when they made it, this full frontal scene that she did, yeah, she was only 16 years old when she did that. So rightfully so, after supposedly discovering this, they decided to cut this scene out of the movie. Now, this isn't in this new version, the one with the extra 43 seconds. That scene has been totally removed. However, this scene does still exist. There is a copy of it out there on VHS, which is where they got this other 43 seconds. So what I'm saying, while it's not here and we'll probably never see it, and me myself personally, I don't want to fucking see it, the fact of the matter is, there is this scene, this pedo scene out there somewhere. It does exist. Someone owns this. Yeah, it's a thing, it exists, and it is out there. Friday the 13th's legacy. The more you know.